All right, let's talk about MNQ versus NQ, when to use both, what to chart, what to execute on, all right? So let's just get right into it. The first thing is you always, 100% of the time want to do your charting on NQ. NQ, all right? So a lot of people seem to have questions about this shit. NQ and MNQ are the same thing, and they move basically identical, but they won't always move the exact same way. Let me backtrack on that. NQ is the actual index, and then MNQ is the index itself, but the index with 1/10 of the size per contract. So, one NQ contract is $20 per point, whereas one MNQ contract is $2 per point. It's 1/10 of it, obviously. You always, like I said, want to chart on NQ. Get your draw on liquidity, get your daily bias, mark out your liquidity levels on NQ. And then you want to execute on MNQ. The thing is, the reason you want to execute on MNQ is because since it's only a $2 spread per point, you can be very, very specific with your take profit and stop loss. For example, let's say I'm aiming for a 1-to-1 and I have a 55 point stop loss, and I'm like, all right, I want to risk $800 on this trade. If I were to say 800 divided by the 55 point stop loss divided by $2 per point, I would just be like, okay, 7.2, I'll just get in with 7 micros, right? However, if I wanted to be like, okay, what if I made this a 20? Then all of a sudden it's 0.72, and then I could do 1, or let's say, for example, it was like 40, that's a bad example, like 47, anything like that. Then it's like, okay, now, let's say it's a 47 point stop loss, and I get in with one NQ contract, then I'm risking 940 instead of 800. So you could lose or win, but you could lose a lot more than you might be willing to risk. Your risk is just not as calculated, but NQ is more volatile. It's like I said, it's the same shit, but sometimes there will be wicks on MNQ that aren't on NQ or something like that, and they'll move a little bit differently. There will be a gap that gets inversed on NQ that isn't on MNQ. It's because MNQ is just following the data of NQ. But NQ is way more volatile, has more volume in it. So sometimes the MNQ will do some weird shit. It'll wick. It won't get through a gap. It won't have a gap. So that's why you always want to look at NQ. NQ is the more favorable asset chart wise, and then execution wise, you will just, if you execute on MNQ, you will be way more precise with how much you're risking and how much you're making. As well as this, let's say you want to get in this trade. Oh my god, we inversed, stop below the low, and you're like, all right, I want to take some off at 1-to-1, but then I think we're gonna go for these highs up here, for example. I want to leave a runner. Well, if you were risking 70 points and you wanted to risk, like, I don't know, $600, you would only be in with half a fucking mini. So, you would be cooked. Even if you said, let's say I want to risk 1,000 and it's closer to 1 mini, that's cool, but you can't split up a mini. Whereas if you were to say, okay, I want to risk 1,000 and it's a 70 point stop loss, now we have 7 micros. You could take off 5 here and then leave 2 as runners to that external draw. So that's the great thing about MNQ, is you could split up runners, whereas on NQ you basically can't. If you are like, okay, I don't want to get fucked by MNQ maybe moving a way that NQ doesn't, which has happened to me, but it's extremely rare. If that's you, then fine, you can trade NQ, but I really wouldn't trade NQ, especially if you trade my system, my model 1-to-1, if you have anything less than a 150K account. If you have a 100K or a 50K, please just stick to the micros and focus on copy trading. Okay, that is the best advice I can. Holy shit, my trap's looking fucking huge. That is the best advice I can give you, is fade the fucking fuck's it called? Hold up. fade the big ass trades in one account. That's just a waste of time. And instead, slowly build up an account. And once you can prove that you're profitable, then you start scaling over to other accounts. You look at me, I only made $700 per account yesterday. And yet that ended up adding up to over almost 8 racks on the day. Like, that's pretty insane. It's just because I have multiple accounts and I was able to copy them over. And that was a trade with micros. If you watch me, all my trades are micros because it's way more specific for my stop loss. I don't really leave runners that often anyway, but when I do, it's obviously very easy for that. You could go break even very easy, you know, or maybe like take one con off. Like, for example, like if you have a data high that's like 10 points above and then your TP is like 30, you might just want to be like, all right, let me just take one con off so I can maybe make like 40 or 50 bucks if we just hit the data highs and then go break even. Something like that. Whereas you would never be able to do that with NQ. So those are the benefits. That's the difference. Chart on NQ, execute on MNQ unless you really want to go for, you know, you're fine with having a little bit of off risk, like your RR won't be exactly 1-to-1. And, you know, you're good with risking more, but that should only be on a 150K account if you're trading props. So, yeah, that's the difference.